After 17 years of loyalty, my boss looked me in the eye and said, "Your position has been eliminated." I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just walked out and started quietly exposing everything they thought I'd never find. "Graham, after 17 years, we're eliminating your position," Brent said flatly, like he was reading a line off a script he barely believed in. Across the desk, Lena from HR was already seated, eyes down, lips pursed like this was a funeral and she wasn't sure whose. "You'll need to clean out your desk by end of day." I didn't blink, didn't ask for an explanation, because I already knew. I'd known from the moment Brent called me into his office with that vague, "Can we chat for a sec?" tone. I'd known from the way Lena was already there, laptop closed, a folder in front of her labeled separation package. The air was already different. It always is when you're the one being walked out, not walked in. "Understood," I said, and nodded once. Then I stood up and walked out without another word. No anger, no pleading, just a quiet acknowledgement that everything I'd built here, everything I'd protected and patched and preserved, meant exactly nothing in this moment. I passed by the IT bullpen where younger analysts sat, heads half turned toward me but eyes quickly snapping back to their screens. They knew. News spreads fast in a place like this, especially when the guy who's always been here suddenly isn't. Most of them were coders I'd trained myself, good kids, sharp minds, but they had no idea what really lived inside these systems. They knew how to operate them. I knew how to keep them from imploding. I knew which patches had been hand-built, which legacy modules were still holding things together with digital duct tape. They didn't know that 3 layers beneath the surface was code I wrote 15 years ago that still handled 70% of our routing logic. I began packing my personal items methodically. Picture of Nora and Emma on our trip to Seattle, that little cactus that somehow survived nearly 2 decades of fluorescent lighting, the coffee mug Emma made me in high school that said, "1 debug dad." I didn't rush. I didn't stall. I just moved like someone who'd already been grieving for weeks. Because I had. Bethany from marketing stopped by, her voice low and urgent. "Graham, I just heard, this is insane. You basically built the IT here." I gave her a tired smile. Companies shift direction. "But with no warning, no exit interviews, after everything you've done?" Her voice rose just a bit, enough to draw glances. "It's fine," I said quietly. It wasn't, but I wasn't going to let them see that. As I walked out of the building, Brent stood just outside his glass-walled office. He didn't speak, didn't reach out a hand, just stood there, watching, like a security camera in a suit. What none of them seemed to understand, what they never took the time to notice, is that I was the most critical person in that entire building, not because I was brilliant, but because I was consistent. Because I was the one who stayed, through reorgs, through bad mergers, through cyber attacks and hardware crashes and weekend rollbacks. I had documented everything, built internal auditing systems that even legal had leaned on during a scandal 5 years ago. I was the invisible firewall that had quietly saved Meridian from disaster more than once, and I had copies. I sat in my car outside the 12-story building where I'd spent most of my adult life, looking up at the glass and steel that had swallowed so many of my years. The security badge I'd just surrendered had been renewed 16 times. I started the engine. I didn't look back. Not physically, anyway. But in my mind, I could already see it. Wednesday would be interesting. Because while they thought they'd erased me with a click, they had no idea what they'd really done. They hadn't just let me go. They'd let go of the one person who knew where every vulnerability lived. And for the first time in 17 years, I wasn't obligated to protect them anymore. The drive home took 23 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio. The silence felt right, like it matched the weather. Gray, cool, too quiet for a Monday morning. Nora was out running errands, like always. She wouldn't be back for at least an hour. That gave me time. I walked into my home office, dropped my box on the floor, and locked the door behind me. No alarm to snooze, no calls to answer, just stillness, and the weight of 17 years pulling at the edge of my spine. I sat down at the desk, the same one I'd used for late-night remote sessions, system patches, emergency restores at 2 a.m. when someone in sales accidentally deleted the entire quarter. I reached down to the bottom drawer, unlocked the reinforced cabinet with an old brass key, and pulled out the flash drive. One of several. Meridian's policy had always prohibited off-site data storage, but 5 years ago, during a legal investigation involving a procurement fraud case, I had designed a full-scale internal auditing system to trace unauthorized access across multiple departments. When I brought up the need for a secure off-site backup, Legal had signed off, grudgingly. They documented it. Then, promptly forgot it existed. I hadn't. I plugged the drive into my personal laptop and watched the folders unfold. Audit logs, time-stamped access sheets, system change summaries, network behavior patterns, even internal communications I shouldn't have had but had kept anyway because in IT, it's not the data you're supposed to have that saves you, it's the data you weren't meant to keep. I started with the Apex trail. Opened the first spreadsheet, vendor ID, AXS343, name, Apex Solutions Group, invoices, approval chains, payment logs. Nearly $1,800,000, 0 cents paid over 18 months. Not outrageous, not flashy, but consistent. Too consistent. I highlighted each line and ran a comparison with our standard software license renewal costs. The overages ranged from 12 to 22%, not enough to raise flags in quarterly audits, but just enough to add up. I pulled up a second tab, ownership records. Apex was registered out of a UPS store in Dayton. The listed agent of registration? Thomas Dunham, Kevin's brother-in-law. No LinkedIn profile, no business website, just a shell. But on paper, he was providing optimization software and workflow solutions. Clever. Blend real services with fake markups. Use a relative to set up a shell company. Filter it all through the finance department. Perfect crime until you fire the only guy who wrote the scripts that track vendor traffic. I leaned back in my chair. Not angry, not even hurt anymore, just cold, focused. My mind was switching modes. From employee to engineer. From observer to architect. For 17 years, I'd been the guy who solved problems no one saw coming. And now, I had one final problem to solve. I opened another folder. This one labeled Secor_archive. Inside was something much more dangerous than payment logs. The original system access map. The blueprint of who had permission to touch what. And exactly when they'd been given those keys. Kevin Dunham had requested expanded admin access to the finance gateway exactly 18 months ago. Same week, Apex Solutions started billing. Coincidence? Not a chance. I clicked deeper, found something older, another vendor. Lakeside Business Solutions. That name had popped up 3 years ago. Another UPS box address, no website. But this one was registered to Patricia Dunham, Kevin's wife. I ran the invoice comparison again. Another $2,400,000, 0 cents over a 2-year span. Inflated, templated, signed off by Kevin himself. Cross-referenced with Brent's internal emails about budget cuts to other departments. Yet finance always kept growing. The pattern was clear. It had been clear for years. I just hadn't looked, not really. Because I trusted them. Because I believed loyalty still meant something. Because I thought doing the right thing earned you safety. I was wrong. They didn't just want me gone because I was older. They wanted me gone because I was the only one who could untangle the threads. I closed the files, removed the flash drive, slipped it back into its case. Then I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at our neighborhood, at the trees, the mailboxes, the street where Emma had learned to ride her bike. This had been my sanctuary. Now it was my operations room. I had no job, no title, no office, but I still had the truth, and I had systems. They'd forgotten what kind of man I really was. They thought I was a loyal relic, the quiet guy in the corner. What they didn't realize was that I'd spent 17 years building a vault, and they'd just handed me the key. The first time I saw Cole Barrett, he was standing at the whiteboard during a strategy meeting, talking about infrastructure modernization like he'd invented the term. He wore a perfectly tailored Navy suit, spoke in acronyms, and smiled like a man who'd never once rebooted a server at 3 a.m. At the time, I thought he was just another consultant. Expensive, temporary, mostly harmless. I was wrong. It started subtle. He asked questions, most of which I answered. He took notes. He requested system documentation, talked about mapping legacy processes, and shadowed my team for 2 weeks. Then the changes came, slowly, quietly. Meetings I used to lead were suddenly optional for me. Emails that normally came to me first now skipped me entirely. Brent stopped calling me our systems anchor and started referring to me in the past tense, while I was still sitting in the room. Cole smiled through all of it. When I passed him in the hall, he always nodded politely, as if none of it was personal. And maybe it wasn't. Maybe I was just a line item on a spreadsheet titled Resistance to Change. But one detail stuck with me. The day he presented his IT restructure model, he skipped over the audit systems entirely, skipped over the one thing that made Meridian secure from the inside out. It was deliberate. That's when I started watching him. Cole wasn't hired to help, he was hired to clear the path, and I was the boulder in his way. 6 months before I was terminated, he gained elevated systems access, something that should have required my review. He got it anyway. 4 months ago, he rewrote several documentation procedures, citing optimization. In doing so, he removed the redundancy protocols I'd designed, ones that would have flagged the vendor transactions now flowing through unchecked. 3 months ago, he quietly initiated a purge of non-essential historical logs, not enough to erase proof, just enough to ensure no one else would find it easily. I knew because I'd already backed those logs up. I hadn't trusted him since week 3, not because he was obvious, but because he wasn't. The perfect consultant, just helpful enough to disarm, just generic enough to blend, just distant enough to walk away clean. But he wasn't walking away. Not yet. He was still there, still sitting in the office that used to be mine, probably feeding Brent and Kevin talking points to minimize fallout. He probably assumed I was out of the picture. But I wasn't out. I was circling. And I was watching him now with a clarity I didn't have before. Cole's LinkedIn profile listed him as a digital transition specialist, Stanford MBA, former Deloitte partner. But dig deeper. There were gaps. Projects that ended without case studies, recommendations that sounded templated, consulting gigs that started just after legacy IT heads were removed and ended just before finance audits went south. It was a pattern. I pulled up 3 other companies he'd worked with. 2 had faced internal investigations the year after he left. 1 no longer existed. Coincidence? Maybe. But I didn't believe in coincidence anymore. I pulled up Cole's original onboarding file, buried deep in HR access logs, which I still had copies of. The hiring bypassed standard procurement. No bidding, no screening committee. Just a direct approval from Brent, signed off by Kevin. I stared at the document for a long moment. Brent brought him in, Kevin endorsed it, and I was being pushed out. The math was simple. This wasn't about digital transformation, it was about controlled destruction, and I was the last firewall they hadn't figured out how to turn off. I closed the folder and stood up, walked to the kitchen, poured a cup of coffee. My hands didn't shake, not anymore. They'd tried to erase me. They forgot who taught the system to remember. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks before everything unraveled, when I found it. Buried in a shared folder that shouldn't have even existed outside executive view, mislabeled under Q2 strategy decks, was a single PDF file, Meridian_IT_restructure_phase 3 PDP. I opened it out of habit more than suspicion. At first, it looked like the usual jargon. Process flowcharts, org charts, buzzwords like agility, scalability, and alignment. But then I saw it, a complete restructuring of the IT department. And my name wasn't on it, at all, not even a courtesy title. There were new roles, new team configurations, a digital integration lead, clearly Cole, a whole new reporting structure. But nowhere, in the entire 17-page document, was there mention of senior systems architect, legacy systems lead, or even audit coordinator. It was like I'd already been deleted. What made it worse was the date. The document had been created 3 months ago, which meant they'd planned my removal long before my last performance review, long before my so-called disengagement started appearing in whispered HR notes. It had never been about my performance. It was about access, about removal, quiet, clean, efficient. I scrolled through the rest of the document. Pages of fake cheerfulness. Phrases like honoring institutional knowledge while embracing innovation, the kind of language people use when they're firing you with a fruit basket. And then I saw it, a section labeled Vendor Integration and Oversight, Finance/IT Liaison. Under it, all vendor oversight to be handled by finance. Systems access granted to financial ops team via Tier 2 admin credentials. Internal audit protocols to be sunset by Q3. Sunset, that was the word they used. As if killing the only system that tracked unauthorized access was just a lovely beach evening. But they weren't even trying to hide it anymore. They were writing it into strategy decks. Smiling while cutting out the one function designed to prevent exactly the kind of fraud I'd now uncovered. I felt a cold clarity settle in my chest. This wasn't just carelessness. It was design. Kevin Dunham had been building his fake vendor pipelines for over a year. Cole had come in not to optimize, but to obscure. and Brent, my own CEO, had signed off on all of it. I should have been furious, but anger is loud, and I'd learned that quiet is more effective. I closed the memo and saved a copy to my private archive. Then I ran a versioning trace. That was something most people forgot existed. If you know where to look, and I did, you can see when a file was edited, by whom, and from what machine. This file had been created by Brent, edited twice by Kevin, once by Cole. So, I left Brent better and Brent on my Suite 13. But that was not it. The final version had been downloaded to a secure laptop, then distributed only to department heads. Not one of them had forwarded it to me. I ran my email archive. Nothing, not even a blind copy. I was invisible, by design. I leaned back in my chair, remembering how Brent used to greet me in the hallway, how he used to clap my shoulder and call me G-Man like we were old friends, how Kevin would nod with that empty smile when I presented audit logs during board prep, saying, "Jake, I don't know how you keep all that straight," and how Cole, Mr. Clean Hands, just kept asking for clarity on our existing infrastructure while quietly rerouting all oversight. I looked at the organizational chart one more time. The new structure placed all IT budget decisions under Kevin. No more independent oversight, no checks, no dual sign-offs, just one flow of money through one department controlled by one man who just happened to be siphoning funds through his family. It was elegant, efficient, and deeply, undeniably criminal. And now it was mine to dismantle. I started with Apex Solutions. The invoices were clean, too clean. Uniform formatting, consistent language, no spelling errors, exactly the kind of document that passes most surface audits without a blink. But I wasn't auditing the surface. I was dissecting it. Each invoice listed vague descriptions: enterprise optimization toolkit, modular workflow enhancement, legacy integration interface. None of it meant anything. Tech-sounding phrases that could justify any number you wanted to assign. The amount started small, $8,700, 0 cents here, $12.45 there, perfectly reasonable for licensing renewals. Then they grew, quietly like boiling water. $22.30, $27.60. One hit, $34, 20 cents for a multi-node deployment package. No documentation, no support logs, no installs, nothing. I knew because I built the installation tracker. And no one ever touched our core environments with those packages. Not even once. I pulled up the vendor approval chain, Kevin Dunham, every time, signed digitally, auto-routed through the same financial ops admin. Linda Crowley, a loyal finance processor who would never question an approved chain. She wasn't complicit, just uninformed. Most crimes don't require evil, just silence. I ran a cross-section of all Apex invoices over an 18-month window against known license renewal cycles. That's when the pattern emerged. The real licenses had been renewed, correctly, from official vendors. Then Apex invoices were layered over them, weeks later, under the same budget tags. Not duplicates, not fake services, markups. They were charging us twice for what we'd already bought. The real vendor got paid. Then Apex piggybacked off the same purchase request ID with a renamed product and a higher price. It was like laundering through a mirror. I checked the vendor registration for Apex again. Thomas Dunham. I already knew that, but now I had payment paths. I traced wire transfers from the company's business account to Apex. Bi-weekly, consistent, clean. From there, the trail vanished into a personal account in Chicago. Beyond that, I'd need federal access, but it was enough. I built a full spreadsheet, side-by-side comparisons of real VS Apex charges, dates, invoice numbers, payment confirmations, and the matching system logs that proved we never received a single thing. It wasn't just theft, it was theft wrapped in procedure. I thought that was it, until I found the second name, Lakeside Business Solutions, 3 years ago. I remembered it vaguely, something the finance team had flagged once during a vendor cleanup, but it was quietly dismissed. Now I knew why. Same structure, same game. Patricia Dunham, Kevin's wife. The invoices from Lakeside were slightly different, less tech-sounding, more consulting. Terms like executive alignment support, organizational agility mapping, departmental synergy workshops. It was the same scam, dressed in HR buzzwords instead of IT ones. And the payments? $28,900, $0 cents, $31 cents, one for $42.70. Signed, cleared, unquestioned. I ran the math. Lakeside had pulled in nearly $2 million, $400,000, 0 cents over 24 months. Apex had siphoned another $1,800,000, 0 cents. Total, $4,200,000, 0 cents. And that was just what I could confirm without internal banking access. I leaned back in my chair, heart steady. It was worse than I thought, not just because of the money, but because of how smart it was. Real vendors, real services, just duplicated, hidden in budget fog. If I were still inside, I might have missed it too. Because they didn't need to fake a big theft. They just needed to bleed the company, slowly, professionally. And the only reason I saw it now was because I had time and perspective. I pulled up one last file, an archived HR note from a quarterly review I'd forgotten I'd backed up. It was from Brent, 6 months before my termination. It read, "Jake is highly capable, but struggling to align with our long-term modernization goals. Recommend transitional planning and eventual offboarding within the next 2 quarters. Suggest involving external consultant to ensure smooth transition of responsibility." There it was. Cold, clinical, strategic. I wasn't being replaced. I was being neutralized. And they'd done it so quietly, so surgically that the company would never even know what had been lost. But now I had everything. The invoices, the chains, the names, the signatures, the plan, and they had no idea I was still watching, still documenting, still 10 steps ahead. Wednesday morning, I parked across the street from Meridian's main building. Same sidewalk cafe I used to walk past every day for 17 years. Only this time, I wasn't going in. I was watching. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, the staff began pouring in. Badge taps, elevator beeps, briefcases, and coffee cups. Brent was one of the last to arrive, stepping out of his black SUV with that same brisk, overconfident pace. Phone already to his ear, suit perfect, smile rehearsed. At 9:12, I opened my laptop. I logged into an old Sandbox email account I'd created years ago during a system penetration test. It looked like a valid internal domain, spoofed subdomain, right font, correct signature format, but existed completely outside the company's tracked servers. No one had ever flagged it because no one remembered it existed, until now. Subject line, "Financial irregularities, urgent review recommended," I typed. "Brent, during routine system maintenance, I've come across several vendor invoices that appear inconsistent with standard licensing benchmarks. Specifically, payments to a company named Apex Solutions Group seem disproportionately high given their service category. This may be nothing, but given the amounts involved, I believe a deeper review may be warranted before Q2 approvals proceed. Discretion advised. Internal audit trace flag automated notification." I hit send. Then I closed the lid. That was it. Nothing accusatory, no attachments, just enough to make a man like Brent sweat. If he was involved, he'd panic. If he wasn't, he'd forward it to Kevin. Either way, I'd learn something. At 9:45, my phone buzzed. Brent's number. I didn't pick up. He left a message. His voice was taut, controlled. "Graham, I need to speak with you immediately regarding a message you may have sent. Please call me back at your earliest convenience." I smiled. "Not yet, Brent. Let the tension build." At 10:30, an email from Lena Quinn. HR. "Intense onslaught on military facilities. 02. Mr. Miller, we've received communication from you that may violate the terms of your separation agreement. Please be reminded that contacting current Meridian employees constitutes a breach of post-employment policy. Any further action may result in legal consequences." I hadn't signed any separation agreement, they knew that, but they were hoping I didn't. Threat, dismissal, isolation. Classic HR playbook. What they didn't know is that I'd written that policy framework myself, back when HR didn't even have a system of its own. At 11:00, I drove to my bank. Inside my safe deposit box was another flash drive, older, but containing the one thing I hadn't shown anyone. Original design documents, admin credential logs, full access modification histories. Including the moment Kevin had escalated his own privileges. 18 months ago, unapproved. The exact week Apex invoices began. Back home, I found 3 more missed calls. Brent, Lena, and now Cole Barrett. Interesting. I checked my inbox. One message. From Miles. "Jake, they're saying you sent some crazy email about fraud. Cole just called an emergency huddle. Now they're locking everyone out of old archives. What's going on?" "Poor kid," I typed back quickly. "Don't get involved, Miles. Just watch." That afternoon, the landline rang. A number I hadn't seen since 2016. I picked up but didn't speak. A familiar voice came through, smooth as always. Graham, Kevin Dunn here. I think we should talk, do you? There's been a misunderstanding. If you have concerns about company finances, the board has procedures for that. Proper channels. Discretion helps everyone. Interesting, I said. Let's meet, just you and me. We can make this right. Generous severance, reference letters, clean paperwork. No need to escalate. What if the board does need to be bothered about Apex Solutions Group? The pause on the other end told me everything I needed to know. You're making a mistake, he said. No, I replied. You already did. 10 minutes later, Lena emailed again. Please find attached an updated severance agreement. Compensation has been adjusted to reflect your tenure. We ask only for full confidentiality moving forward. The offer had doubled. And they still thought they were dealing with a man who wanted money. They had no idea that by now, I was already 5 moves ahead. I hadn't spoken to Harold Knox in nearly 5 years. The last time we'd exchanged more than a polite nod was during a system security overhaul when the board was panicking over a ransomware scare. Back then, he was the only one who asked intelligent questions about firewalls, log redundancy, off-site backups, not optics, not PR. He wanted to understand the mechanics. That's how I knew he was the one I needed. I didn't email, I didn't call his office. I dialed the personal number he once gave me in passing, scribbled on a post-it during a late audit session. If you ever see something the others don't, call me. I'd never used it. Until now. He picked up on the second ring. Knox. Harold, it's Graham Miller. You remember me? A pause, then. Jake Miller, hell yes. I heard you left Meridian. Not exactly by choice, I said. I need 15 minutes, somewhere quiet. Another pause. Then, meet me at the Linden Park benches. By the East Trailhead, half an hour. It was enough. I printed a summary of everything. Dates, amounts, names, screenshots, flash drive sealed inside a black envelope. No signatures, no threats, just truth. When I arrived, he was already there. Same gray jacket, same steel-rimmed glasses. A man in his late 60s with the posture of someone who never stopped being a soldier, even after the uniform was gone. You look tired, he said. You look the same, I replied. He gestured for me to sit. Tell me why you didn't go to legal. Because legal works for the CEO, I said, and the CEO works for Kevin. And you? I don't work for anyone anymore. He nodded slowly. I've noticed Brent and Kevin whispering too much lately. Thought it was politics. You're saying it's worse? I'm saying it's deliberate. I handed him the envelope. What's this? Everything. Vendor fraud. Fake shell companies. Over $4 million, 0 cents siphoned over 3 years. I'm not looking for my job back. I'm not looking for a payout. I just want someone who matters to know before they bury it. He opened the folder, eyes scanning fast but careful. Apex, Lakeside, Patricia Dunham, Thomas Dunham, good Lord. He found the spreadsheet showing the duplicate payments, the timeline overlays, the signature chains, his brow furrowed deeper with each page. You've been sitting on this how long? Long enough to be thorough, not long enough for them to destroy the records. You think they're still covering tracks? They think they already got away with it. Harold exhaled. There's an emergency finance committee session tomorrow. I'll make sure this hits the table. Quietly, I said. For now. Of course. He closed the folder slowly, like it was something alive. Why come to me? Because you're the only person on that board who actually reads the numbers, he chuckled. Always thought you were the guy holding the company together from behind the curtain. I shrugged. Turns out I was just another line of code to them, one they didn't need anymore. They miscalculated, Harold said, standing. You're not code. You're the system integrity check they never knew was running. Now they know. Soon, so will everyone else. He tucked the envelope into his coat and nodded once. Watch the news tomorrow. I watched him walk away across the park, the weight of truth in his hands. I didn't feel relief, not yet, but I felt the engine turn. For 17 years, I was the one who made things work in silence. Now, for the first time, silence was going to work for me. That night, I sat at my desk and opened the lid of my laptop. No alarms, no distractions, just a blinking cursor and the weight of 17 years pressing gently against my spine. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to get even. I was trying to restore balance, to remind them that every system, even one built on fraud, had a point of failure. I clicked into the old sandbox domain, one that mirrored Meridian's internal network but was completely mine, unmonitored, invisible. Years ago, I created it to simulate intrusion testing. Now it would deliver something far more precise. I composed the message with care. Subject: before you approve Q2 bonuses, please read this. The body was brief. To the Meridian Board. Attached is a full audit report detailing financial inconsistencies involving Apex Solutions Group and Lakeside Business Solutions. The report includes documentation of inflated vendor payments, internal access escalations, and conflicts of interest involving current executive leadership. Total confirmed diversion exceeds $4,200,000, 0 cents. Supporting data includes financial ledgers, vendor registrations, approval workflows, and user access logs. I recommend you review this before finalizing bonus allocations or quarterly reporting. The audit trail is clean. The evidence is complete. The choice of what to do next is yours. So via iota. No threats, no emotion, just data. I attach the master file, encrypted but easy to unlock. Then I use the delayed send function. Delivery time, 8 o'clock a.m. in sharp, exactly 30 minutes before the board's Friday morning finance session. I closed the laptop, sat back, exhaled slowly. Then I went to bed. Slept better than I had in months. Friday morning, the sky was clear, the kind of sharp, bright April morning that makes you forget the world burns under perfect blue. I brewed my coffee, took it black, sat on the porch in my old chair, facing east. The city began to stir. Garbage trucks, dog walkers, kids dragging backpacks. Inside my coat pocket, my phone buzzed softly. 8:03 a.m., one missed call. Unknown number, voicemail pending. 8:05.3 more. All with area codes matching executive assistants. I ignored them all. 8:17. Miles texted, "What did you do? Police are in the building. Wilcox and Brent are in separate rooms. Barrett looks like he's going to vomit. They shut down the entire 9th floor." I smiled faintly, not out of malice, out of recognition. The system had finally responded. At 9 o'clock a.m., I knew the emergency session would begin. Harold Knox would be sitting at the head of the table. My email would be printed. The flash drive in his coat pocket would be in his hand. No one would be ready. They never are. At 9:32, another text. Security escorted Kevin out. Cole tried to say he was just a consultant, but legal's tearing through every contract now. This is insane. I set my coffee cup down, looked up at the tree in our front yard where Emma used to hang a tire swing. I didn't feel victorious. I felt accurate. At 10 o'clock a.m., my phone rang again. This time I picked up. "Mr. Miller," a woman's voice said, calm but clipped. "This is Patricia Graves from Meridian's legal counsel. Would like you to come in immediately to discuss the information you've provided the board." "I am available by phone," I replied. "This really requires in-person." "No, it doesn't," I said evenly. "Everything you need is in the report. Everything I have is already backed up in multiple secure locations. If anything happens to me or my family, additional copies go to the SEC, IRS, and 3 newsrooms already primed to publish." Silence. Then, "The board is taking this very seriously. Several executives have already been placed on leave. They would appreciate your cooperation." "They already have it," I said, and hung up. By noon, I was eating lunch at a diner 20 miles outside the city. The kind of place with cracked booths and bad coffee that tastes perfect when the air's buzzing with resolution. The first news alerts arrived at 12:42 p.m. Meridian Technologies executives under investigation for financial irregularities. Names weren't listed yet, but they would be. I didn't post, didn't reply, didn't gloat. I just paid the bill in cash and stepped back into the sun. The system had never been mine to control, but it had always been mine to understand. And that morning, I had proven that understanding was more powerful than authority ever would be. Monday morning, I walked into Meridian's headquarters wearing a suit I hadn't needed in years. Dark gray, clean lines, no tie. I didn't need it. The security guard at the front desk looked up, blinked, then quickly printed a visitor badge. "Welcome back, Mr. Miller," he said, his voice quieter than usual. People moved out of the way as I stepped into the elevator. No small talk, no second glances. Everyone had seen the headlines. Everyone knew something had shifted. The elevator climbed past the floors I used to live on. The server floor, the operations center, the half-windowless cubicle zone where I'd fixed 1,000 things no one ever saw. This time, it didn't stop until the top. Executive level. First time I'd ever been there without fixing someone else's mess. Now, I was here to set terms. The boardroom smelled like new leather and expensive silence. 10 people sat around a polished table, portfolios open, eyes sharp. Harold Knox gave me a subtle nod. The interim CEO, formerly the COO, rose to greet me. "Mr. Miller," she began carefully, "thank you for coming. The situation you've brought to light is unprecedented." I didn't respond, just waited. The full extent of the fraud appears even worse than initial estimates. Our forensic team has identified nearly $5,200,000 0 cents in diverted funds. Still, I said nothing. Just placed the folder I was holding onto the table and slid it forward. "What's this?" she asked. "My terms." She opened it. Her eyes flicked across the page, her brows lifted slightly, then again and again. She looked up. "You want full audit authority across all departments?" I nodded once. "Independent budget control for security infrastructure?" Another nod. "Veto power on all financial tech procurement?" "Yes," she paused. "This is unusual." "So was stealing $5,200,000. 0 cents. Silence, heavy and absolute. "You'll report directly to the board," Harold said. "We want you to take the role of Chief Information Security Officer. You'll be the first." "That's why I'm setting the foundation now," I said. "I'm not coming back to patch holes. I'm coming back to make sure they never form again." I stood. "You have until noon. I have other offers." I turned to leave. Hand on the door, Harold's voice stopped me. "Did you plan this all along, Graham?" I looked back over my shoulder. I didn't plan to be fired after 17 years. Everything after that was just me doing what I've always done, identifying vulnerabilities and implementing security controls. The door shut behind me with a soft thud. 11:47, they called. They'd accepted every condition. 6 months later, I sat in my new corner office on the 14th floor, overlooking the Columbus skyline, a view I'd never imagined I'd be handed, let alone earn on my own terms. The nameplate outside my door read Chief Information Security Officer, a title that hadn't existed before I forced its creation. A role that now came with full audit authority, its own independent budget, and a direct reporting line to the board. No more detours through finance, no more executive filtering, no more pretending I didn't see what I saw. Brent Lawson had been dismissed within 48 hours of the board review. The official statement cited leadership restructuring, but everyone knew. Kevin Dunham had pled guilty to multiple counts of fraud. In exchange for full cooperation, he received a reduced sentence. Still significant, still federal. Cole Barrett tried to run. He made it to Brazil. For 3 months. Then came the extradition request. He returned in cuffs. I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't need to. The system worked this time, because I had forced it to, and because now I was the one writing the firewall policies. My former team now reported to me, but I wasn't micromanaging. I'd promoted Miles to lead day-to-day operations. He was young, sharp, and had survived the fallout with his integrity intact. All he ever needed was for someone to see it, and I did. One Friday afternoon, Nora showed up at my office with lunch in hand. "Still saving the company from itself?" she asked, smiling. "Just reinforcing the edges," I said, taking the sandwich from her. "You good?" she asked. A simple question, but a heavy one. I looked around my office. At the glass, the quiet hum of cooled servers behind reinforced walls, the new team upstairs doing their jobs with eyes wide open. I thought about how I could have used this position years ago, before they tried to erase me. But then again, maybe it only exists now because they did. "I'm good," I said, not triumphant, not gloating, just resolved. That weekend, we drove out to the edge of town, took a trail we hadn't walked since Emma was little. The trees looked the same, but we were different, stronger, calmer. After dinner, I checked my phone. One new message from Harold Knox. "Board unanimously approved your Q4 security proposal. No amendments, no objections. We trust your lead. Thank you." I smiled, not because I needed their trust, but because I'd built a system where it was finally deserved. I slid the phone back into my jacket. Nora saw the look on my face. "What is it?" "Nothing," I said, and meant it. "Just thinking about bridges." "Still rebuilding them?" she asked. "Some," I said. "Others, I just let collapse under their own weight. And the ones worth crossing again? I've reinforced them right this time." We walked the rest of the trail in silence. No alarms, no firewalls, just peace. There are moments in life when silence speaks louder than rage, when walking away with your head high is more powerful than returning with fire. Graham didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw accusations. He didn't storm into meetings demanding respect. He just paid attention. And sometimes, that's the most dangerous thing you can do in a world built on people hoping you won't notice. For 17 years, he was the man in the background, the one who fixed things without being asked, who caught problems before they made it to headlines, who quietly held the digital foundation of an entire company together. And for that, for being too steady, too good, too aware, they tried to erase him, replace him, forget him. But what they didn't understand was that men like Graham aren't built on titles or praise or LinkedIn profiles. They're built on principles, integrity, precision, long memory, and quiet hands that never stop documenting. We live in a world where loud often wins, where those who speak the most are assumed to know the most, where appearance can mask absence and charisma can cover incompetence. But stories like Graham's remind us that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one sitting silently in the corner, watching, connecting dots no one else bothers to see. He didn't retaliate with a scandal. He didn't burn the company down. He built a better system, not because he had to, because that's who he is. And perhaps that's the difference between revenge and justice. One seeks to hurt, the other seeks to correct. Graham chose the second. And because he did, others were protected. Like Miles, the young analyst who might have been collateral damage if not for a quiet word and a guiding hand. The truth is, most people won't get statues, or press releases, or even a thank you when they leave the building for the last time. But some leave something better behind, a standard, a firewall of ethics, a quiet reminder that someone once stood here and did the right thing, even when no one clapped. So if you've ever felt replaced, if you've ever been pushed aside by someone louder, flashier, younger, or just better connected, remember this: you are not invisible. What you built matters, and sometimes it's not about being remembered by everyone. It's about being the reason something didn't fall apart, the reason someone younger felt safe, the reason a system held together just long enough for truth to find its way in. Graham's story isn't dramatic because of explosions. It's powerful because it whispers. You can lose everything they think defines you, your title, your desk, your email address, and still be the one who wins, not because you outshouted them, but because you outlasted them, outthought them, outlived the lie. And at the end of it all, you stood, not to boast, but to quietly reinforce what they tried to destroy. So wherever you are right now, at a desk that's not yours anymore, in a life that feels paused, in a chapter that doesn't look like what you worked so hard for, know this: you haven't failed. You haven't vanished. You're just between systems, and maybe, just maybe, the next one will be built your way. If stories like this speak to you, quiet strength, unwavering integrity, and the courage to stand alone when it matters most, this is a space for you. We tell stories that aren't just heard but felt, stories for those who've been underestimated, overlooked, and still chose to do the right thing. If that's you, we'd be honored to have you here. No noise, no pressure, just truth, told one story at a time.